Good morning. We are at the Freiburg New Church Assembly. Today is Thursday, July 30th. I'm Gard Perry, and my title is That Ye Love One Another. And our theme for this week is our favorite Bible stories, where our lecturers will present one or more of their favorite Bible stories with a word toward what they believe to be the inner sense and its occurrence in the biblical narrative. And Swedenborg famously announced that there would be a continuous inner sense which he would report for every book of the Bible, then, as some have said, promptly changed his mind. And so that did not mean that there isn't a continuous inner sense, and our lecturers this morning will, through their favorite Bible stories, illuminate the ever-present inner sense. Hey, so listen, as I begin my talk, will you take one deep breath with me? Let it out and find yourselves here with me. As I begin my talk, I'll let you know that I have selected one of among my favorite Bible stories. It raised a question for me for which I wished to find the answer. So the substance of my talk and the journey of composing the talk was exploring this question and finding an answer to it. And you will hear that I've enlisted 3 individuals to help me find that answer, after which I'll weigh in with what I found to be the case. And in the course of that, I will have told you the story, of course. And there is a moment where I will alert you that there's a sort of a way to bring this home. So I have a very simple mental exercise which you can do in the silence of your own mind. And we'll see how that goes when we get there. It's very brief and very simple if you wish to try it. And after that, which will be the conclusion, I very likely to make another request, and that's on the basis that I've wound up putting a lot of thought and a lot of time into composing this talk. And I discovered along the way a few good ideas. And it may happen that during the course of this talk, you'll suddenly stop and I'll be still talking and you'll realize, why, I think I've just been struck by one of them good ideas. And hopefully you'll remember it and you'll be able to bring it into the discussion. To foster that possibility, it is also likely that I will ask you to turn to your neighbor after the talk and just in 2s or 3s, or maybe 4s, in a minute or 2, ask your neighbor, did anything significant strike you or what came up? You may listen to that, say your own if you have one, and after a minute or 2, we'll bring all of that into the discussion. I thank you for all that. So the story comes from John chapter 15. Abide in me and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit of itself unless it abide in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. They that abide in me and I in them bear much fruit, for without me you can do nothing. If you abide in me and my words abide in you, you will ask what you desire, and it shall be done unto you. These things have I spoken unto you, that my joy might remain with you, and that your joy might be full. This is my commandment, that ye love one another as I have loved you. Now, in the story, Jesus spoke that to his disciples. I've selected this story for the phrase, that you love one another, and for the phrase that follows, as I have loved you. Raises a question, doesn't it? How did Jesus love them? That's my question, and my quest this morning is to find an answer. The question at hand then is, if Jesus commanded his disciples to love one another as he loved them, how did Jesus love them? I've enlisted 3 individuals to help find an answer, mostly well known: George Dole, Emanuel Swedenborg, and William Worcester. And then I'll weigh in with my own thoughts about Jesus' love for his disciples. Turning to the first of our guides, George Dole tells us how he engages with the Bible. And here I mentioned that this is the preface, what I will read, and I'm reading it almost in full. It's a relatively brief preface to a work that is unpublished that George Dole wrote for his biblical and theological class at SSR. I was in the class. And it's 1985, and it is wonderful writing. And I share this text almost in its full composition. George Dole writes, "The Bible is admitted of extraordinary variety of approaches for interpretation. To me, this calls into question any approach which takes nothing but stance that the Bible is nothing but the literal Word of God, nothing but a literary treasure, nothing but a source for historical research, nothing but a collection of ancient stories and sayings. My religious background," writes George, "is Swedenborgian, with a strong emphasis on the Bible as a revelation of spiritual meaning couched in historical images. In the early 60s, I did doctoral work at Harvard in the Old Testament studies with an equally strong historical critical emphasis. At that time, being both graduate student and a Swedenborgian pastor, I survived by keeping both disciplines largely separate. There are 2," he continues, "very different ways of looking at those historical images for guidance. One way is to look for support for our own, presumably highest, convictions. And the other is to look for light on our quest for personal and social transformation. The first intent prompts us to search the scriptures for statements that say what we want them to say, and then lift them out of their context. The second may prompt us to approach the scriptures and search for those fundamental principles that give coherent meaning to the bewildering twists, turns, and inconsistencies of our own lives. This consistency begins to make sense if, he writes, if one assumes that the central focus of the Bible is not on God, but on our relationship to God. It is telling us not simply what God has said, but what we have heard. This presumes a dual authorship of the Bible. Divinity constantly at work through the agency of human community. To put it simply, it assumes that divinity was speaking in many ways and that the community was often pathologically hard of hearing. It assumes that divinity is still speaking and that our own hearing is far from perfect. And it can make an immense difference if we admit both facts and pay attention to our own listening. Yes, sure. Yeah. We may not be able to hear what it says about God unless we face what it says about us. I believe then that the Bible is to be taken very personally. Therefore, I will be at least dimly aware of the way I may see it may say as much about me as it does about the Bible. I hope you will find it saying something about you. Because I believe our happiness, he writes, and in fact our survival depends at least in part on some consciousness of a shared meaning. If then the Bible is to be read devotionally and as normative for our lives, we are faced in the last analysis with a choice between constraining the text to agree with ourselves or constraining ourselves to agree with the text. One or the other, the reader or the text, stands in judgment. One or the other will emerge from the dialogue transformed. If we take it to be in any real sense the Word of God, then surely it is we who need to be changed. think you could hear George's voice in all of that. Very precious writing, very beautiful ideas. George exits the scene, and Emanuel Swedenborg is waiting in the wings. He gives further guidance on our approach to the Bible via his short work, The Doctrine of Sacred Scripture. It is in everybody's mouth that the word is from God, is divinely inspired, and is therefore holy. And yet hitherto no one in the 18th century, at the time Swedenborg is writing, has known wherein it is divine, for in the letter the word appears like a common thing, in a style strange, neither so sublime nor so brilliant as apparently as the writings of the day. For this reason, one may easily fall into the error with respect to the word and into contempt for it. And while reading it may say to themselves, what is this? What is that? Can this be divine? Could God, whose wisdom is infinite, speak in this manner? Wherein consists its holiness? Whence comes its holiness? Yet the style of the word is the divine style itself, with which no other style, however sublime and excellent may it seem, is to be compared. For every other style is darkness as to light. The style of the word is such that there is holiness in every sentence, every word, and in some places even in the very letters. This is why the word conjoins human beings with the Lord and opens heaven. And as it conjoins us with the Lord and opens heaven, it follows that when you read it from the Lord and not from yourself alone, you are filled with the good of love and with wisdom. In this you have life by means of the word. Finally, he writes, to aid in your reading of the Bible in this depth, I have been called to disclose that it has been written in a language of correspondences, to the end that every word may contain and support deeper levels of love and knowledge about how to love, clothed in the form of laws, stories, and sayings. Such being the word in this sense of the literal meaning of the Old Testament and the Gospels and Revelation, such being the word in the sense of the letter, it is evident that it cannot be understood in this depth without knowledge of correspondences. Okay. Swedenborg is making his departure now. And who is it now but it's William Worcester, author of the classic The Language of Parable. And he begins by saying that knowledge of correspondences is the key to the spiritual lesson of this particular Bible story. By its aid, I can hear him speaking now, perhaps you can too, he says that this parable can be opened to disclose the divine truths with which it contains. And so from the language of parable, he first reads the portion of the parable about which he's going to speak. Abide in me, he reads us, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit of itself except it abide in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine. You are the branches. They who abide in me and I in them bear much fruit. For without me you can do nothing. If you abide in me and my words abide in you, you shall ask what you desire, and it shall be done unto you. The vine, William Worcester writes, cannot stand alone, but attaches itself by strong tendrils to a tree or a grape arbor or other support that it might rise off the ground into the air of sunshine where it can bear fruit. The leaves are large. The flowers are small and inconspicuous, but then the grapes are borne in clusters, each grape being a little sack full of sweet juice. Can you imagine that, what I've just read now, in your mind's eye as a mental image, seeing the vine Perhaps you can imagine yourself standing in a vineyard on a sunny day. You can even feel the sun on your back, looking at a cluster of grapes in this lovely grape arbor. The grapes you are seeing in your mind's eye hold water made sweet in the vine by circulation in the sunshine. It is like water with sunshine in it. Worcester says, if in the vine we can find water drawn up and circulated in the air and sunshine until it is infused with life and spirit. Now can you imagine the grapes and full of the sweet juice in your mind's eye undergoing a similar change to be infused with life and spirit? Reflect on this image for just a moment as you hold the literal image of grapes in a vineyard in your mind as an image made sweet and living by a perception of a heavenly purpose, that you aspire to the sweet affections of higher love stored in your inner mind. William Worcester reads the rest of the parable. These things have I spoken to you, that my joy might remain in you, and that your joy might be full. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. I hear him saying now, it's as if he's saying, I've said something about correspondences of the vine, Gard. Yeah. Now it's your turn. What's your answer to the question? If Jesus told his disciples to love one another as he had loved them, how did Jesus love them? As is so often the case, the answer lies hidden in plain sight in the first 3 verses that precede our text, where Jesus says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that bears fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. And then he tells his disciples, you are already clean because of the words that I have spoken unto you. Perhaps you can now hear the answer yourselves. Jesus tells the disciples that there are aspects of his inner life that bear no fruit. They need pruning, and that his Father in heaven is the vine dresser who prunes his own inner life. He, Jesus, in turn, can prune aspects of the disciples' inner lives that bear no fruit, that fruit being their love for one another. My answer then is this: Jesus loved his disciples by setting an example, by allowing his Father in heaven to prune desires in him that would have interfered with his love for the disciples. He could, in turn, command his disciples to let him prune anything in them that would prevent them from loving one another. To bring this idea a little closer to home, I invite you, as a very brief mental exercise in the quiet silence of your own mind, to bring a person in your life, anyone it can be, a spouse, a friend, a worker, this, that, or the other thing, but a person with whom you are in relationship and you feel called to love as a neighbor. So I won't give you a lot of time for this, but it would be good if you could pick one person. There they are. I can't see them, but you can. You might realize there are times that it's difficult to love that person. Now, this, of course, is the case. Who among us is not difficult to love at one point or another with one other person in our lives, let's just say. So now imagine that although the difficulty is real, I'm affirming this, it's not the difficulty that is going to be the next move in this exercise. It is your response to it. Perhaps taking something too seriously, too personally, exaggerating the problematic behavior of the other, being overly judgmental, and the like. Such an attitude would interfere with your loving that person as you might wish to do, might it not? And might it be something, that attitude, that kind of habit, that feeling, might that be something in your inner life that ought to be pruned? Later, when you have time for reflection, you might invite the Lord to prune that attitude. And you might just have an experience of heeding the Lord's command that you love one another as he has loved you. In the ancient Near East, Jesus spoke in parables composed of images from nature to teach people how to love one another. In our time, I think we're talking about something like empathy. Empathy on a deeper level than we normally think about and associate with the word, yes. So I begin to conclude my talk with a few words about empathy, thinking that the mental exercise with which many of you have just encountered, that dynamic is an exercise of empathy in the modern sense. So I'm now in the 21st century, having exited the ancient Near East. To begin on empathy, Wilson Van Dusen starts us off. He has this as a heading on a chapter in his book, The Natural Depth of Man. And he begins the chapter with this sentence: perhaps the single most important skill that should be taught to all persons is the capacity to really see, hear, and understand others. Sure. So what is empathy? And here I turn to Herbert Fingaret, a not so well-known American philosopher who writes persuasively on the subject. Faced with another person, he writes, who asks us for guidance, in particular as to the meaning of their lives, the listener attempts to grasp what life means to this person. But how? Well, they use their personal experience and their own education as they listen, but that's all background. They bring all their knowledge, their talents to bear in the actual course of attempting to help by means of empathy. It is the intuitively empathic perception that allows one to help another and to thereby love another. But how does one do this? Aha, Carl Rogers comes to the rescue. It has been found that in empathy, a good listener is who they are. They're genuine, without front, without facade, openly being the feelings and the attitudes which are at the moment flowing through them as they listen to the other. The feelings the listener is experiencing are available to them, available to their awareness, and they can live with these feelings, be with them, and they're able to communicate their own feelings to the person to whom they're listening if that's appropriate. And this works because as one finds someone else listening acceptingly to their feelings, they little by little become able to listen to themselves. They begin to receive the communications from within themselves that they hadn't been able to do so because they were too difficult. But here another person listened to them, no problem. That's a piece of cake. I can do that. And they go, wow, that person could do that. That helped me. Maybe I can listen to those feelings in myself now. They begin to receive the communications from within themselves, and as they become more open to what is going on within themselves, they become more able to listen to those feelings which seem to be so terrible, so disorganizing, so unique, so personal. They've never been able to recognize their existence in a full human way within themselves. And while they are learning to listen to themselves, they also become more accepting of themselves. They find that you showing consistent and unconditional positive regard for them and their feelings, they move toward making the same attitude within themselves, accepting themselves as they are, respecting and caring for themselves as persons, being responsible for themselves as they are, and therefore ready to move forward in the process of becoming more themselves and therefore more truly human. Carl Rogers now exits the scene. And we're left here in the room with ourselves. I'm going to give a brief summary now. This morning I've selected and read a portion of the biblical story with an image of abide in me, with Jesus being the vine and we are the branches. I presented ideas about how to engage with the text from George Dole, Emanuel Swedenborg, and William Worcester. And I offered my own thoughts. And I suggested in a moment of experiential inner dialogue that we interrogate obstacles or attitudes that might interfere with our loving one another. And I took a quick look at a 21st century version of what I believe to be a first century ancient world teaching in the form of this lovely saying and parable and biblical imagery. So I'm so grateful for historical references to what life was like in the ancient world. It's kind of a relief from the hubbub, the distractions that what I think of as the complications of the 21st century, which simply did not exist at the time of Jesus' life in ancient Palestine. Life was difficult. I'm not saying it wasn't. It was, of course, it was unimaginably difficult. Short lives, a lot of terrible oppression and difficulties. But Jesus' mind was, I'm imagining, very simple, clear, beautifully stable, able to live within the nature of his of Nazareth and elsewhere, and able to talk to people in their own language, which was the language of imagery from nature, largely. And so, as well, it's helpful sometimes to bring that core kernel of a message into 21st century language, for which I believe empathy is the closest equivalent. So after which, as I said, it was quite likely I was going to ask you, and I said, you know, there were several good ideas that I ran across as I did this, and I wondered if anybody would be struck by one of them good ideas, or perhaps another one. And so if that would be the case, and as I've been summarizing, perhaps something has come up. If you would turn to your neighbor, this is 2 minutes max, in twos or threes, just huddle up a little bit and say, hey, what did you hear? And this will be a dialogue between those of you who are willing. Just turn your chair to someone, Clark, and yep, that'd be great. Yep. Look around. If you see someone who needs a neighbor, please. Yeah. There you go. All right, you can cozy up. Husbands and wives are okay. Okay, good. So I need a bell. I've been given a cue that it's time to bring ourselves back into the room. Om, Om Mani Padme Om. Om, Om. I was given a cue that, okay, Gard, that's long enough. I really enjoyed listening to all of that and seeing all of you speaking to one another. So, as is our custom now, if something came up for you during the talk or and you'd like to say what it is, if you'll raise your hand, I'll call on you and Dave will bring you the microphone. We have 10 minutes until our excuse. So thank you all for doing that, by the way. And then any questions, raise your hand. And if I don't see anybody, I will call on you. Jesse is the first person. If you raise your hand, I'll remember you. So you can raise it any time. You don't have to wait until Jesse's through.
Being fairly literal, but I had never really thought about the fruit. I mean, I guess I have in some ways bearing fruit, but as you were talking about it very literally, the juice in the grapes and everything, I was thinking about if we can let go of the thing that gets in the way of the communication with the other person, whether it's I got to be right or whatever, I don't like this person or whatever it is that's keeping me from connecting with that other person, then the fruit is going to be so much more wonderful than just me being right. It's going to bear fruit of I actually really feel good in this loving relationship. So just reminding myself that, letting the Lord guide this interaction, I guess, it's just going to be so much better than me trying to be in control, I guess.
Lovely. Thank you. Randall, thank you.
The whites have the stage. I just like the whole idea of the empathy, the idea of being a good listener,
Okay.
providing for someone a different view of what they might be having trouble with, and then giving it back to me too. Does that make sense?
You like that whole idea?
I like that idea.
What do you like about it?
Having always been a yacker, the idea of I've learned over the years how important it is, partly from 12-step programs, to sit and listen and not interrupt people, and being a member of the loud family, we were called, to sit around the table and everybody talking at the same time, but to sit back and listen, and how much I get from being able to hear everything that's going on and having empathy for what people are saying, but to be able to reflect back after the fact to maybe help someone to understand what's going on, a problem they're having. I like that anyway.
Katie, thank you.
I am in the profession of day-to-day attempting to lift the spirits of those who are still developing emotional self-regulation and physical self-regulation, who are between the ages of 2 and 6. And we often remind ourselves at our Montessori school that a child isn't giving you a hard time, they're having a hard time. But it's much easier to give children that leeway, but sometimes adults have the same problem, so we're all growing all the time.
Very good. Susanna.
I'm very attached to the words abide in me, and I will abide in me as I abide in you. And I did a word study on the word abide when I was in seminary, and it's an indwelling. It's a sense of being a part of, and that's how I feel the Lord, as a part of an indwelling in me. And I had a wonderful example of a person who felt the indwelling of God, that God abided in him. When I did my training for chaplaincy, I was in a ward of the hospital where there was a fellow in the hallway because he was on his way to a test, completely covered with bandages. He'd been hit by a motorcycle, or he was on a motorcycle, he'd been hit by a car. Everything was bandaged. All you could see was his face. And he was on his way one way, I was going the other way because somebody was pushing him along. And I just stopped for a moment and I just said, God bless you. And he looked up with the most beatific smile and said, he already has, because he was alive and he felt it. He felt that indwelling of God that kept him alive through breaking every bone in his body. And I just felt like a light kind of enveloped us and felt the presence of God because it was indwelling in him and he shone it through his face.
Beautiful. Okay. Okay, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. I saw a lot of people talking with one another. Just say one thing that came up that's sort of relevant. Share it with us. Roz, brave person.
I was really struck by what Marilee said. Is it okay if I tell your story? Okay.
That's good. Okay, great. You're modeling something, by the way. I'm going to just quickly point it out. If you have permission, you can say something the other person said that was illuminating, or you can say what your own self was. Please go.
Marilee told a story of years ago, probably when she was a teenager here at the assembly. The one thing that was really stayed with her, like all these years from then, was that the minister said, if somebody needs something from you, this is along the lines of pruning the branches. If you're with somebody and you think, I need to prune them, they need to learn this from me, I'm going to tell them how they need to be pruned. Like, that is not going to work. I might have reinterpreted. I mean, I'm just telling you what I heard. I don't know if this is exactly the story, but anyway. But what will work is if you listen to that person with empathy, and if they share with you, I'm really having a problem with this thing that you have observed, then they're inviting your response to, like, yeah, this is how I've dealt with it, or here's a suggestion maybe, or whatever. Because and part of the reason, obviously, that Marilee's story touched me was that I did have that thought. Was Jesus saying, I'm pruning you, so go ahead and prune each other? No, that's where the empathy comes in.
Right. While the mic is being passed to Dean, go ahead, Dave. It's all right. Dean, sorry.
Oh, I didn't hear an name.
That's all right. I said it, Dean. So, of course, the part that struck me was that Jesus had allowed his heavenly Father to prune his inner life so that it didn't interfere with his loving the neighbor. So it's really the pruning of our own inner lives, which is in order to help us listen to one another better. Dean.
The fact that we come here each year means that we don't know what's happened in each of our lives for the last year. And one of the things I treasure most about here is being able to talk to people and say, whatever was going on. And I just want to speak about David right next to me. I told him about my stuff, and he worked on it, and he empathized with it, said he didn't have an answer, but the fact that he was there. I love you, David. Oh, thank you. I love you.
Good job. So listen, we only have a couple of minutes. The clock just got advanced a little bit to more accurate time. So listen, I have a couple questions for you. You can just raise your hand. I guess you could nod your head. Was anybody able to hold an image of being in a vineyard and seeing the grape juice and the clusters in your mind as a visual image instead of just an auditory sentence? Why don't you raise your hand? I'd like to know this. Yeah. All right, so that's good. And you can nod your head on this one. Well, I'll just ask the first part. Was anybody able to allow one person in their life to come up in their visual field and say, and go through a process with them that was helpful? Okay, good. Shake your head if you didn't. Never mind. Come up with me. I do want to know that. That's, though, good feedback to know if that's possible, because I think it's helpful to bring. Yes, please. Right back there with Catherine. And that'll be the last one, because we're up to time.
Just to follow on that question, Gard, there was a connection between the person that I brought to mind, what the challenge was, and then from the comments as well that people shared afterwards that kind of connected the whole kind of scenario in my mind. So through what you shared plus what everyone else shared, brought it all together.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So you're free now to move about the cabin. You can unfasten your seat belts.